I would like to introduce Paul Prill, one of our board members, who will introduce our speaker.
Hey, thank you, Richard. So our speaker tonight is, as Richard said, Cynthia Rohrbach. She's the project manager and biologist with the Swan Conservation Trust, which was founded in 1992. The original conservation focus was the headwaters of the Big Swan and Big Creeks in Lewis County, part of the Duck River watershed. And I didn't realize until I started doing some research on this that the Duck River is the most biodiverse river in North America, containing more than species of fish than all the fish in Europe and all the rivers in Europe, and more varieties of fish per mile than any other river in North America, which is pretty impressive. I know that Tennessee has a great reputation for being a biodiverse rich state among the 50 states. The Swan Conservation Trust has had great success in purchasing and conserving large tracts of deciduous forest, obtaining state and federal grants to convert bottomland hayfields to native warm season grasses, partnering with private landowners to cooperatively restore and manage a remnant prairie, and obtaining a TDOT migration funds to preserve and enhance wetlands on the Big Swan Headwaters Preserve. In 2005, Cynthia was named Conservationist of the Year by the Tennessee Scenic River Association, both for her work with Swan Trust and for her commitment to educating young people and local stakeholders. She served as the Green Schools Program Coordinator for the Tennessee Department of Education and Conservation. Tonight, she'll be talking about conserving and restoring native habitats on private lands, hardwood forests, remnant grasslands, and wetlands. If you got questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them as they come up. And Cynthia, it's all yours. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me back. And my presentation is somewhat like the one I gave in 2019, but so much more has happened. So I've added a lot to it, and I hope you enjoy. Let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to get it up there, Richard.
And while you're working on that, let me ask everyone to mute themselves other than Cynthia and me for the moment. So you're in the process of sharing your screen, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. Looks like it has started, and there you are.
Okay, I'm trying to get it into slideshow mode.
Right.
There it goes.
There you go. All right.
Okay.
You're off to the races.
Is there a way that I can get all the people's faces off the side?
Do you see a view, a box that says view in it?
Yeah.
And if you click that, you have some choices. I don't know if you'll be able to do exactly what you want, but if you go side by side speaker, that might be the best view.
I might just make it go away. There.
Yeah.
I just want to be able to see my whole screen. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be talking about conservation that Swan Trust has been doing. We're 30 years old. This year is our 30-year anniversary. And we've just along the way ended up doing a lot of restoration. And some of it's on our land and some of it is on private land that our preserve is next to, which is the farm community, which is where I live. And so let me just get going now. Paul said some of this, but I'm probably just going to repeat it anyway. We're a 501c3 land trust organization, and our mission is preserve, protect, and restore native hardwood forests, scenic natural areas, biodiversity, wildlife habitat, and water quality on the Western Highland Rim of Tennessee. We fulfill our mission by acquiring lands for preservation through purchase or donation, and we have received a couple of land donations. One was from the Nature Conservancy. They purchased about a 23-acre tract on Highway 412. It's on a little stream called Langford Branch, and they got it because it had the federally endangered Tennessee yellow-eyed grass growing in a seep there. And after the purchase and all was secure, they donated it to us since Langford Branch is a tributary of Swan Creek. And they thought we would, you know, living near and everything, we would be good owners for it. And since then, we've cooperated with the Tennessee Natural Areas Program because it is now a state natural area and it is protected with a conservation easement, which the state holds. We also hold conservation easements. We don't have a lot of them. We have 3, and we would like to do more, but it's a little problematic for organizations like ours. We're all volunteer, and it's really good to have conservation easement, defense, insurance, because things come up with landowners, especially as land goes from generation to generation or buyer to buyer, buyer to seller, different things happen. And it's really good to have insurance, and it's very expensive. And we just haven't been able to do that yet. So we have the 3 that we have, and we monitor them every year and try to make sure that the landowners' wishes are upheld. We also cooperatively manage land with other landowners or agencies. And I just mentioned about the Tennessee Natural Areas Program. Also, we work with the farm community on managing their prairie, and we conduct projects on our lands and in the local area. Let's see, how do I get this off of here? That taskbar that's usually at the bottom, it showed up at the top and it's blocking some of my screen. Can I make that go away?
That's a new one on me. I haven't seen that before.
No, I
Has
haven't either.
anybody run into that problem?
I would like that to go away. Well, basically what I'm saying here is that we conduct probably 8 to 10 events per year. Sometimes there's something in the winter, but it's mostly in the growing season, and they're usually very well attended. A lot of times we have an expert come, and you might recognize this young man right here. It's Dwayne Estes, who's at this time, I think he was a student at Columbia State, but he still was so knowledgeable, and he's showing us the different grasses and how you can tell. Let's see, we also like to do bird outings, and so this man here is a friend of mine from Alabama, and he comes up and takes people out birding like 6 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of where we go, you know, has creeks, and we just try to educate people about the native flora and fauna. And as much as we can, we do things with children. I had really got into benthic macroinvertebrates in the creeks. I did my master's thesis on that, on benthic macroinvertebrates in forested and clear-cut forests, streams. And so I just really enjoy doing that. And I try to get kids out there, and they're usually pretty amazed at what's in the creek hiding in the little gravels that they didn't know about. You know, they might know about crayfish because they're big and you can see them, and they know about fish. But as far as these little, these are stoneflies, and mayflies, caddisflies, the little snails, and certain ones of them, you know, indicate good water quality. And especially if you have a very good diversity of insects, it indicates good water quality. So we use our Big Swan Headwaters Preserve as a living laboratory, and get out as much as we can with the children. So just to give you a little orientation as to where we are like right here in the southeast corner of Lewis County, southwest corner of Maury County. and it's a heavily forested area. I found a book several years ago. It was written by TVA, and it's called The Scenic Resources of Tennessee. And in it, it has pictures of Stillhouse Hollow Falls and Rattlesnake Falls. And it talks about how this area right here, about 19,000 acres in this area, was supposed to become Murray State Forest in the 1930s. But World War II took the money away, and big timber companies eventually stepped in and bought up large tracts. And so we tried to, well, we ended up negotiating with one of the timber companies in our area. It was Willamette Industries, which is really an Oregon company, but they had land all the way out here. And we're trying to get the land that is now Big Swan Headwaters Preserve. So it's kind of a long story, and I won't get into all the details of it. But you know, this physiographic region is the Western Highland Rim, and it's the most heavily forested in the state. Eastern Highland Rim over here, and then the Central Basin in the middle with Nashville, Murfreesboro. And the elevation is much lower in the Central Basin. It's several hundred feet lower than it is up here on the rim. And here along the edge of the rim, here along the edge of the rim is and a pretty good escarpment. And that's why there's a lot of waterfalls. The geology of the rim is more of a hard, cherty type of rock formation. And in the basin, it's a softer limestone. And so when this all eroded away, this highland rim is still intact and, you know, slowly weathering, of course, but it's remained pretty tough. And so that's how the waterfalls form, coming off the edge of the rim down into the basin. And this is a fairly up-to-date map of the property that we own in Lewis County. And it doesn't have the farm community outlined here, but you can see all the little dots that mean houses, and there's roads. And the farm community is about this size. I'm sorry, keep inadvertently. It's a little bigger than the property that is now Swan Trust. And we started out buying at auction a 300-acre piece over in this corner, and it was called the Star Branch. It has the Star Branch going right through it. And that was the first piece that we got that was part of the preserve. And slowly we just added little pieces to it. We had a neighbor that lived right here, David and Janice Smith, and they wanted to sell parts of their farm. And so they sold us these fields, which I'll talk about these fields a little later. You can try to remember where they are. It's right at the confluence of Cox Branch and Big Swan Creek. And they were hay fields for a very long time. And so we've done a project there. Before we even started buying this property, we got 100 acres over here in the Big Bigby watershed. This is the Big Bigby running right along here. And it's also a tributary of the Duck River. And this is the headwaters of it. And we got 30 acres when we purchased it. And then we were donated another, well, 60 some acres. And so it's about 100-acre preserve now. It's called the Highland Woods Preserve. And that was in 1994. This purchase that we made for the Star Branch was in 1998. And then we've just added to it. And the biggest part of the purchase was when finally the timber companies started caving. They finally decided to sell, and Willamette gave over to Weyerhaeuser. Weyerhaeuser wanted to make a deal with us, but instead they sold to a timber management organization. And then we were finally able to get a reasonable price for it. And it ended up forming the heart of the preserve. It was about 1,100 acres when we got it. And subsequently, we bought this piece over here because it has this green pond wetland on it. And we had been eyeing that forever and hoping that it wasn't going to get logged. And they logged around it, and there ended up being some loblolly pines coming up and making a forest next to it. And but they never logged in it, thankfully. It is a forested wetland, so they stayed out of the middle of it. And we were able to purchase this tract from someone else that got a lot of land in this area when the timber companies were divesting. And so it hooks on to the preserve. And this funny little piece here was donated to us by the Smith family. They found that there was a mistake in surveys, and this land over here and their land, there was this blank area in between. Sorry. There was this blank area in between, and he went to the courthouse and quit claimed it. And then he gave it to us because he saw that it connected to our preserve down here. And so that was pretty cool. We were able to use that as a match for a grant that we applied for to buy this tract, which has a big spring on it that feeds Swan Creek. And we always call it the Boiling Spring tract. It's not hot or anything, but there's just a lot of water coming out from a very high cliff. And it's a beautiful little tract. And it also has a hayfield on it, which at some point we'll probably do something with that hayfield. But anyway, just to give you an idea of what it all looks like around here and where we've been working. And these are the two most famous waterfalls in our region. There's plenty of other ones that aren't named and some that are named. And we've got a few on our property, not as tall as these ones are, but still very nice. Stillhouse Hollow Falls is now a state natural area. It was privately owned, and back in the mid 2000s, the early, I think it was probably around 2005, the landowner contacted us and wanted to know if we wanted to buy it. And at the time we were already buying the timber company land and we just couldn't swing it. So we contacted Tennessee Parks and Greenways Foundation. That's their old name. Now they're 10 Green Land Conservancy. Kathleen Williams was at the head of it at that time, and she just ran with it, just took it and ran with it. And we helped them fundraise. And so they got it and donated it to the state. And now it's a state natural area. Maybe 5 years ago, the state bought another 92 acres next to it, and it has two smaller waterfalls. Right now, there's no trail access to those waterfalls, but we get Alan Trentley, who's in charge of this natural area, and he has taken us to the waterfall. So he will do that for private groups if you're ever interested in doing it. The wildflowers are just spectacular in April. It's really worthwhile going. And Stillhouse itself is too worthwhile going if you've never been there. Rattlesnake Falls is privately owned. It used to be owned by a woman who was very free with it. When our kids were growing up, we used to picnic over there and hike around over there, and she was very okay with it. She was an absentee landowner, lived up in Maryland. When she died, she bequeathed it to her niece, and her niece, I think, is much more worried about liability, and she has closed it. And even if we call and ask if we can bring people and we'll be careful and everything, she's like, no, she won't do it. So the Natural Areas Program has contacted her and offered to purchase it, but of course they have to do a fair market value thing, and she probably would like a lot more for it. I don't really know what she would be asking, but it is such a beautiful place. And Dwayne Estes did an undergraduate floristic study of it, which is available I have a copy of it, and he probably has, would give it to people, but he did a great job surveying the whole property. Found some rare plants and stuff. Oops. So this is kind of probably just a review for most of you all who have a lot of value in natural areas and habitats, but it's why should we care about it? And it's because these places represent the natural heritage of our area, which has evolved over the millennia to best tolerate the variations of our climate. Also, the native plants support the life cycles of insects that evolved here, and they provide significant ecological services, such as being host plants for the life cycles of butterfly, moths, and other insects. And they provide nectar sources for hundreds of different native pollinators. These habitats provide a diversity of insects, fruits, nuts, and seeds that birds and other animals depend on. And a lot of these places are refuges for rare plant and animal species that are threatened and in decline from habitat destruction and from invasion by non-native species. Some of the threats to natural habitats are destruction from development associated with human population growth, and that is the #1 threat. Also, as we know, the spread of non-native invasive grasses, forbs, vines, shrubs, and trees, and also alien diseases and insects threaten our forests. The conversion of forests and prairies to agricultural activities, pastures, hayfields, and row crops, all of these things are not good for the native plants. On the Western Highland Rim, the conversion of native hardwood forests to pine plantations is a very significant threat. The degradation of aquatic habitats from soil erosion and stream bank destabilization. Sediment has been implicated as the #1 pollutant to our streams and rivers. And then, of course, global warming and climate disruption is going to be, and probably already has started being, a threat to our native habitats. So first off, I wanted to talk about the hardwood forest habitat. When Swan Trust first began, our mission was really about forest preservation. And we've really, tried to expand it. And since SGI has formed Southeast Grasslands Initiative, it's now Southeast Grasslands Institute, we've kind of really, expanded our interest beyond the hardwood forest habitat. But it is such an important ecosystem that we really put a lot of value into it. Forest facts in Tennessee. In 2002, according to National Land Cover data, 54% of Tennessee landscape was some type of forest. And so, of course, that means it could be pine forest or bottomland forest or ridgetop hardwood forest, lots of different kinds of forests. In 2018, data from the U.S. Forest Service Southern Research Station gives 51% of Tennessee as forest. So it has declined a little bit. And 71% of these forests are privately owned family forests. 17.8% are corporately owned forests, 9.8% state forests, 6.4% federal forests. And 72% of Tennessee forests are hardwood oak hickory. Hardwood forests are being cut at a faster rate than softwoods. And I'm afraid that's because they are converting the hardwood forests to pine. So more of them are being cut. In Lewis and surrounding counties on the Western Highland Rim, hardwood forests are being converted to pine plantations. And maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to go up in a small plane, and I got a lot of pictures of what's going on in Lewis County. And this is very close to where we live. And these are in different stages of being cut. Like this is probably the most recent one. It's very bare. This one down here probably has been recently planted. You can tell the pine is dark, whereas it's dark green, whereas the oak hickory forest looks more yellowish green. And so all this back in here is pine. And it was kind of shocking, really, to see how much pine there was already. And like I said, this was 10 or 12 years ago. I know where they take these logs out onto Highway 43, and so many log trucks have gone out since I was up in this plain that I know that all of this is gone. They do leave hardwood in the drainage ways, and that's a best management practice. So they're supposed to do that, and pretty much you can see that that's what they do, but it's, you know, it significantly changes and fragments the forest for all those animals that depend on a hardwood forest. And I'll get more into that too, the differences between the ecological situation in a pine plantation and a hardwood forest. So a loblolly pine forest has very little herbaceous growth on the forest floor due to a thick cover of needles. The understory and the shrub layer are sparse compared with the deciduous forest, and pine plantations lack biodiversity with only one kind of seed produced and no edible leaves for insects. Some other negative threats from human development are forest fragmentation, which affects animal habitat, especially for large predators, which is why we don't have, you know, bears in Middle Tennessee or wolves around anymore. And there's even certain bird species that just have to have large forests. They depend on a large interior forest. So forest fragmentation is not a good thing. Increased impervious surfaces from development, and that causes a lot of runoff and flooding. Changes of land use from forest and agricultural to residential and commercial uses just, you know, gets rid of habitat. And probably all of you are just as aware as I am of, you know, you drive up to Nashville from down here and the Spring Hill area, the Brentwood area. I mean, it's just incredible, the growth, and how it's just like they'll just acres and acres and acres of land are just scraped. Like that battery plant in Spring Hill. Oh my gosh, that was farmland that, you know, has been in farmland for centuries, and now it's going to be a battery plant. So whatever, right? The increase in non-native invasive trees, shrubs, vines, grasses, and forbs are changing the ecology of forests and everywhere, really. But I've just listed a few here. Trees, for example, mimosa, tree of heaven, and princess tree, and shrubs, multiflora rose, privets, autumn olive, bush honeysuckles. They all replace native shrubs, especially on the forest edges, and they can just close up the edge of a forest where all you see is these bush honeysuckles or privets. Oriental bittersweet, Japanese honeysuckle, the vincas, English ivy, and Chinese wisteria are the vines that we are dealing with. Japanese stiltgrass that easily comes into disturbed sites and outcompetes native plants. The seeds are transported in creek corridors during floods. So a lot of the creeks are just lined with this Japanese stiltgrass. Thankfully, it's easy to pull out, but it's a big job. Some forbs, such as garlic mustard and various lespedezas, are invading forests. And then these plants can escape from yard plantings into forests and other natural areas. Nandina, burning bush, Japanese barberry, Japanese spirea. The Bradford Callery pear is now widespread on forest edges and, of course, in fields and fence rows. It's just unbelievable. Ornamental grasses like bamboo, zebra grass, giant reed, pampas grass, Chinese silvergrass. They're all supposedly invasive. And some things it seems are more invasive, like the Japanese spirea. It doesn't seem to be invasive in my area anyway of the Western Highland Rim, but I know that up on the Cumberland Plateau, I've seen it on roadsides just growing like, a wild plant. So it kind of depends on probably soil conditions and other things, whether plants will take off in an area. But I also think that climate change is going to change that. And some of the things that are real bad invasives down in Alabama are going to be moving up here. Kogon grass and some of those other ones that we hear about. And so this is a picture of Big Swan Headwaters Preserve, and this was this spring, and you can see, the levels of canopy, understory, shrub, and forb layer. This is what a healthy forest should look like, and that's how it can support a high diversity of plant and animal species, because some of them like to live up high, some of them like to live on the ground, some of them like to live in between. And in a loblolly pine plantation, you don't have these layers and this diversity. Some of the beautiful moths and insects that are supported by a healthy forest. There's just a very small number of them here I'm showing you. And some examples of the shrubs, flowering shrubs and forbs. Yellow lady slipper we happen to have. And then, of course, we have our neotropical migratory songbirds that come up and depend on our forests for breeding in spring and summer. And this is just 6 of them, but there's, long lists of migratory birds. And then we have our resident birds too that really depend on the forest and also provide services in the forest. We have 7 woodpeckers in Tennessee. I found these kind of cool pictures where it has the downy and the hairy next to each other, and people have trouble usually telling one from the other because they're colored so much the same, but they differ in size and the size of the bill. And then I've had people say, oh, I had a red-headed woodpecker at my bird feeder. And I said, no, it was probably a red-bellied woodpecker because it does have a red head. So you might think that's what it is, but a red-headed woodpecker has a hood over top of the whole head. So that's the difference there. And the coloring is different, the white and black. And of course, our pileated woodpecker and yellow-bellied sapsucker and northern flicker. Those are our 7 woodpeckers. And, they just really help in the forest, breaking down dead trees and breaking up fallen logs and looking for their insects. And besides them, of course, our other year-round resident birds, we have hawks and owls, and those are the big ones. And then we have little ones like the chickadees and the titmice. And so when we have a good forest, we have good birds. Deciduous hardwood forests are important for recharge of groundwater, which surfaces in headwater areas as seeps and springs and then feeds into streams and rivers. Also, groundwater in many rural areas is critical to the water supply because people have wells in rural areas. And this picture is just a little rocky bank, and the water springs out from underneath of it, and then it goes on to the creek. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about some of the restoration that we've done. And the first example is just a small hardwood restoration that anybody could do really on private land. And we did it as part of a TDOT wetlands mitigation project. we became aware in about 2011, they were widening Highway 412 between Columbia and Hohenwald. And whenever they do highway road widening, there's wetlands that get destroyed. And so they have to mitigate for those destructions. And so they're looking for projects. And somebody called us, I think somebody from TDOT called us and asked if we had any wetlands that we might be able to use for their mitigation. And you can either do restoration, a total restoration of a wetland, or you can do an enhancement, or you can do preservation. And for this project, we chose enhancement. Upstream from, or up slope up here in this area above the green pond is a loblolly pine forest. And we're thinking about it, and we didn't really like that the loblolly pines were up there anyway, but in order to help with the hydrology of the pool, we thought if we didn't have loblolly pines up there, which they never go into a dormant state, so they're sucking water 24/7, 365 days a year. And so we thought if we got rid of them, maybe it would help the pond be around longer, and that would help with the amphibian breeding. And so that's what we decided to do, was remove those loblolly pines. And so we took away about an acre. We hired a local Amish, well, he's not really Amish, it's what they call New Order Amish. They will use tractors instead of horses. So he brought his tractor over, and he had another guy that helped him, and we told him to, if there was any hardwood trees in amongst the loblolly pines, like there were some, to try to leave them. And this is what it looked like after they were done. There are some little hardwood trees. The front part of the site, really, they didn't really leave any. So we ordered bare root seedling trees from Tennessee Division of Forestry Nursery, and had some planting days and planted a bunch of them. And that was in 2012. So 5 years later, this is what the site looked like. And besides the bare root seedling trees, there were many volunteers from Seeds in the Bank. Acorns, there was some sweet gum trees under the pines there, very small sweet gum trees, but they had dropped some little spiky balls, and so there was seeds in the seed bank. And then places where the trees were cut down inadvertently, they coppice sprouted back. And so we've got a really pretty thick growth of hardwood trees here. And I thought I should take another picture, more recent. Unfortunately, it was after leaves had already fallen on the trees, from the trees, but you can see how tall they are now, and they've kind of thinned out a little bit. And one thing we have to do is keep going in every year, and we do it this time of year because you can really see the little pine seedlings coming up. Once pine trees have been there, it's going to be very hard to get rid of them. So we're kind of determined not to have any right here, so we're pulling them. So some tips for how to do it. Like I said, converting a loblolly pine stand back to deciduous hardwood can be challenging depending on how long the pine trees have been on site and how many pine cones they've dropped on the site. The pine cone seeds will remain in the soil and germinate for many years. For a private landowner, probably just pick small plots, maybe 1 acre, 2 acres, or smaller even. One advantage is that pine will not resprout after cutting like hardwood will. So once it's cut down, that tree is gone. Conserve any hardwood saplings whenever possible. Natural hardwood regeneration is one option. So you don't have to plant trees there. You'll just have to keep pulling up the loblolly pines. The timber companies in our area used to use natural hardwood regeneration. They would cut the trees and then they would just let them come back. But then they got into this mindset of, you know, the pine forests, they grow really quickly. They can sell them for pulp. They don't have to let them grow to be pine timber size. They can harvest them younger for pulp. Anyway, natural hardwood regeneration is one option because hickory nuts, acorns, and other tree seeds may be in the soil. For a faster result, you would, though, want to order a mix of bare root seedling trees, and you can get really nice trees from the Division of Forestry Nursery. They will give you bundles of 25 of each type. So 25 is the smallest amount of one species that you can order. And the best thing to do is look around and see what is growing in the forest and select your list of species from there, because they're going to be the ones that, of course, are going to do the best if they're already growing there. Once they're planted, you have to pull out the pine seedlings, best done in the winter. Plan B could be a mixed pine hardwood forest, which isn't a bad thing. It'd be easier and it's better for wildlife than a monoculture loblolly stand. There are some birds that like pine trees, kinglets, Chuckwell's widow. There's some, you know, I'm not saying they're all bad, but it's not my preference for a forest. And then, of course, you have to remove invasive non-native plants that will come up, and they will come up. So moving on, as I said, we've become very interested in the prairie, savanna, and barrens type of habitat. These areas were once common in Tennessee. Many people believe that the eastern US was completely forested in the period before European settlement. But on the contrary, there's fossil evidence that large migrating animals grazed here. Also that Native Americans maintained openings with fire. And fire suppression in recent times has allowed most of these openings to return to forests by ecological succession. Many have also been converted to agricultural areas, such as pasture, hayfields, and row crops. And the remaining plant communities of former prairies are largely confined to roadsides, power line right-of-ways, and small remnants. It has been said by the Southeast Grasslands Institute that 99% of the grasslands in the Southeast are gone, and that's pretty sad. If you are good with grasses and wildflowers, and you know which ones are indicators of prairies, you can find areas that used to be prairies. If you don't know, you can enlist the assistance of botanists from agencies or universities or conservation organizations or Southeast Grasslands Institute to help. You can identify an area on your property that already has some quote unquote good species, meaning that they're prairie indicator species. And it'll likely be an area that hasn't been mowed or had any agricultural activities for several years. The soil quality doesn't have to be good. These plants are adapted to the kind of soil that has not been amended with anything. Remove non-native invasive plants from the area, of course, pulling, mowing, or careful use of herbicide. Burn the area if possible between October and February to encourage seed germination, return nutrients to the soil, and control woody growth. And then collect seeds from another prairie to seed your area, or order from a company like Roundstone Seed Company up in Kentucky. They have regional seeds that are from our area, and that's what you would want to use. You wouldn't want to order prairie seeds from the Midwest or somewhere far away. So this is a picture of the prairie as it came back to the farm community. And I'll tell you the story about it. Let's see. I just wish I could get rid of this bar up here. It's blocking my slide. Anyway, well, this area, okay, it's on this map here. This whole area in blue was forest. It was part of the farm that was forested. And it looked like these areas over here. There weren't any houses. There wasn't a road here. This is a blueberry patch that wasn't there. It was all forest. And so in the late 70s, it was cleared for farming, and it was farmed until like about 1983, and then it was left fallow. And several years later, Swan Trust had Milo Pine come out, and we weren't even going to this area to look. We walked down to the Swan, which we took this road here, went down to the Swan, had a nice creek walk and flower identification with Milo. He was at that time, I believe, the state botanist for Tennessee. And then on our way back, we were just going by this area, and he happened to glance over and he said, "Oh my God, you guys have a remnant prairie over there. And how come this is like this?" And we told him that we used to farm it, but we left it, and all these flowers came up. And so he just got his notebook out and he just started right in there and started writing everything down that he could see. And that was the day that we started cataloging all the species there. And this picture is similar to how it looked there. This is where now there's a few houses in there, and a lot of the trees have been cut down. But we've been keeping the prairie. Thankfully, we've been protecting that. And so we have burns every year. We've learned that it's not good to burn the whole prairie every year, so we've got it divided off into sections, and that's in order to keep some of the overwintering insects and caterpillars and things that are dormant, so we aren't killing everything. So there is, of course, some collateral damage from burning, but as long as you don't burn everything, then you're going to replenish your insects again. And we've had to get together a water truck and a pump, and so we have that on hand, and we have had to use it. But we also have these flappers and rakes, and sometimes we just train people on the spot, but a lot of the same people come year after year to help do it. They like doing burns, and so it's kind of a social thing. It's developed into a social thing, but also it has its ecological advantages, and it really has helped people to understand more about the prairie and why we're doing what we're doing, and how it's helpful to the habitat. And there's just some pictures of burns happening. Part of our prairie has an open woodland, and there's some different species in there, and so we want to keep that way. And we're probably going to have to remove some of the trees because every year they're getting a little bigger, and so we're going to work with the Southeast Grasslands Institute, try to get a grant to help us with that. These are 3 of the grasses that we have: big blue stem, little blue stem, and Indian grass. Those are the 3 that do the best. And they're all bunch grasses, and that means, that they grow in clumps, and it's really good for small mammals. They can just kind of make little tunnels and stuff that go in between the grass clumps, and some of the birds too like to make their nests in bunch grasses. And of course, there's just a lot of really cool wildflowers. These are 2 of the species of sunflower. This is ashy sunflower or downy sunflower, Helianthus mollis. And I want you to try to remember what this looks like here, because I'm going to show you another picture later about these ashy sunflowers and what happens to some of the buds before they can open. This is a picture of Bart Jones from Tennessee Native Plant Society. Some of you might know him. He lives in Memphis, but he comes over a lot and has brought TNPS people to do walks at our prairie and down at the creek too. He's brought people down for several different kinds of walks. This is what was federally listed egret sunflower. It's been downlisted from federal, but it's still on the state threatened list. And this, of course, is the spiked blazing star. And we have two other liatris species that we found in the last few years. Liatris aspera and squarulosa is the other one. And these are just some other of the beauties: narrow leaf mountain mint and one of the solidago species, wild bergamot, purple passion flower, of course that's a state flower, wild quinine, little leaf sensitive briar, Maryland meadow beauty, rose pink, Culver's root, white topped aster, orange butterfly weed, rattlesnake master, hairy angelica. That's one that grows in the open woodland section. You won't find that out in the open sunny prairie. And goat's rue. And so these are just a few examples. Starting in 2019, Swan Trust has sponsored 3 BioBlitz events to identify all the plants and animals at the prairie. And I think when I gave my first talk to wild ones in 2019, I told people about the BioBlitz that we were going to be having that summer. And we had a couple of wild ones people come and help us with the BioBlitz. Yeah, and here's a picture of the people that came. I'm not sure if that's a complete picture. I know that there's TNPS people in there and Swan Trust people and SGI people. But I know there were some wild ones, but maybe I just don't know who they are. Some of the highlights of the day were that we were able to confirm plant species that we hadn't been sure about because the experts helped us with that. Oh, you see Margie Hunter over here, right? There's Margie. And then they also provided a lot of educational opportunities or educational information for the attendees. We found several new plants. None of them were rare, but this is one of them. The Nitsin lice was a new hypericum, which is a St. John's wort. There's a bunch of different St. John's worts out there. It's pretty interesting. This day was the first time we had started identifying insects out there, and we found 31 butterfly species. And one was a county record, which is this one over here, the funereal dusky wing. It's not a beautiful butterfly, but it was the first time it's ever been found in Lewis County. And we found 7 dragonfly species that day. One of them was this one, citrine forktail. And this is just a photo of everybody out there working, looking for plants, looking for insects. We did have someone doing birds and someone looking for snakes. So it was pretty fun. In September of 2020, it was our COVID BioBlitz. That's what I call it. It was not as many people, and they were invited people because we just didn't want to have a big crowd like we did. But we had some pretty cool finds. Rita Venable came that day to help with butterflies, and Alan Trentley was there. And I'm trying to remember who else. We had some Swan Trust folks, and what we called the pollinator of the day, the one that we found the most of, was the goldenrod soldier beetle. And it wasn't only on goldenrod, it was on a lot of different plants. This picture shows it on Maryland golden aster. Remember I said I wanted you to remember about the ashy sunflower and how couple of those buds were just hanging over. This is something that I have noticed for many years, and I could never figure out why those buds would be fallen over, cut and fallen over. Luckily, the plant then responds by sending out a new bud, and so most of the plants still will have a flower on them. But I just never could figure out. Well, Alan Trentley found the sunflower head clipping weevil, and that's it right here. And I don't know if he saw it doing that, but when he entered it on iNaturalist or something, that's the name that came up, sunflower head clipping weevil. So we're like, oh, okay, that's what's doing that damage. So that was cool. We added 8 new butterflies or caterpillars that day. So we're up to 39 species of butterflies. And we discovered a mining bee colony, and that was really interesting. There's some paths that go through the prairie that have been used by golf carts, and over the years they've become totally bare of grass. And you know, when you talk to people about native landscaping, they say that you should leave some bare ground and not worry about, you know, having your lawn totally grassy and everything. Well, it's because some bees like that bare ground. And we were walking on this path and we were looking down and we thought that these little things were anthills. But then we kept hearing all this buzzing, and we were looking up in the trees and we thought there's some swarm that's happening up there or something. Well, finally somebody looked down and they noticed that there was all these tiny little bees, like sweat bees, going in and out of these anthills. And this is a picture of one of them that's enlarged, and you can see that it has yellow pollen on its back legs. And we took a picture of it. And there's a lady at UT Knoxville, a professor. She has a lab, and all of her graduate students are working on native bee projects. She's the only person in the state that is doing this. So Tennessee is really undersurveyed as far as native bees go. So we sent her the picture. Her name is Laura Russo. We sent her the picture and she identified it as a Calliops species, which is a species of mining bee. It's provisioning its nest. They go down into the ground. They don't go very far, apparently, with that pollen, but they lay eggs in there and they leave the pollen there, just, you know, like bees do. They make like a little bee bread and leave it there for their eggs. And then when the eggs hatch, the larvae have something to eat. So that was so cool to discover. That was one of the best things about that day. Rita Venable said to me, that was the best thing that happened to me all summer, was finding this mining bee colony, because she had never seen it before, and neither had I. So that was cool. So 2021 we skipped because of COVID, and 2022 we decided to have the BioBlitz be an all arachnid. I was calling it all insect for a while, but then not arachnid, all arthropod. I realized calling it all insect was going to leave out a bunch of critters, so I changed it to the all arthropod BioBlitz. And we invited Dr. Steve Murphy, who's a professor of entomology at Belmont. Bart Jones, again, came back. Alan Trentley, he just loves BioBlitzes. He'll come to everything. This is Pandy Upchurch, and she is retired now from TWRA, but she's really involved in the Master Naturalist program, so she's a good person to have. And this is a young graduate student that Laura Russo sent from her lab. Her name's Erica, and she came to help us with the bees. So we had a great time, and we decided that we were going to not only work during the day, but we were going to take a dinner break and come back after dark and do some collecting at night. And also, who didn't show up in the picture because she wasn't there when we took the picture. She showed up late. It was Lisa Powers. I don't know if you know Lisa Powers, but she's a wealth of knowledge about all kinds of animals. I mean, her specialty is herpetologist, but she's really good with insects too. And she's a great photographer. So she took a lot of really good pictures for us. And so the highlights of the day were that the butterfly total bumped up to 46 species. And we had another new county record, which is this one, the Delaware skipper. Art Jones found that. He also found the funereal dusky wing, and so he's pretty proud of himself. And he's great because he will report them to wherever it is that you report, so that now it's recorded that these butterflies are found in Lewis County. The night collecting added many new insect groups to our data. And so the moth total is now at 23 species. I think it might be more than that because I think I left some of them out. Data management for this is like a nightmare. I gotta ask Dr. Murphy if he has an intern or has a graduate student that might help me as an intern manage the insect data, because I'm not really an entomologist, but I find it very interesting. The dragonfly total, we found 2 new dragonfly species. This one here is called black saddlebags. This is one that we found. And those really aren't structures. They're just part of the coloration of the wing, but it makes it look like it's some part of the body, but it's not. But that's why it's called black saddlebags. There's so many interesting names for the dragonflies. It's really cool. And then the mining bees, this girl, Erica, she came back because the day that we were doing this BioBlitz, the mining bees were not active that day. And she said, we'll keep an eye on it and I'll come back. She drove over, took samples, and went back to Knoxville on the same day. And she took a couple of bees and she took a sample of the pollen from one of the nests. And they're going to analyze the pollen and figure out what plants the bees are using. And they have presumptively identified it as Calliopesis nebraskaensis, which has not been seen or identified before in the state. But as she said, and as I previously said, Tennessee is very undersurveyed for native bees. And so it makes sense that nobody would have found Calliopesis nebraskaensis before. And so when they do, it's been sent away. And when it's confirmed, our site will be tied to the first record of this bee. So that's pretty cool. And let's see, here's Dr. Murphy, and he's got his little aspirator thing, which is really cool little thing that he does. You suck, you put this where the insect is, you put this tip on the flower where the insect is, you suck air and the insect goes into the jar. And then you can look at it better and you can take a sample home if you need to. Anyway, he was showing us how that thing works. And these are just some of the other, I couldn't even, I could have spent days putting more pictures and more pictures into this presentation of all the insects that we found. Ones from different orders, Orthoptera, and I don't know, it's very complicated. So other activities that we do at the Prairie Barrens, of course, we do a lot of invasive species control, and Chinese bush clover, or Lespedeza cuneata, is a major threat. So far, what we do is we mow it before it goes to seed, and we've been burning it in the fall to keep it from spreading. We have some Johnson grass. It's mostly along the edge. We mow it several times during growing season, trying to keep it from spreading any seeds. And the stuff is just, as soon as you mow it, it sends up another stem with seeds on it, like in a matter of a week or two. It's unbelievable. And winged sumac or shining sumac, it's a native sumac. We have it, and it seems to be increasing, which is a little worrisome because it's taking up habitat space that the wildflowers could be. And so burning keeps it from getting to be too big, but it still comes back from the roots and continues to slowly spread by rhizomes. We've been told that if you burn in October, you might be able to control it better. I mean, it might actually kill it back. So we did that this year. So we'll see if it made any difference. We also have signs up, and we have a lot of public educational events about the structure and function of the prairie, trying to increase awareness of its importance to pollinators and biodiversity in our community, and trying to encourage stewardship by the community. In 2021, we defined the boundaries and we voted on it, and so it's been agreed by the community that it's to be preserved. And we are now making a proposal for expansion to double the size of it, and that's going to be voted on in January. So that's another whole thing, because the fields that are we're going to put the expansion into are just fallow fields. They're full of blackberries and things, undesirable things, but there's also prairie plants there, so we know that it can be done. And we're involving community members and elementary school students in collecting seeds for the expansion. And here they are, they're working on, in this picture, they're working on getting native grass seeds from big blue stem and Indian grass. And this is the class, they're like second, third, and fourth graders. And I mentioned those fields down at the confluence of the Cox Branch and the Big Swan Creek. They've been hay fields for a very long time. And we partnered with TWRA to convert them to native grasses. If we'd had more money, we would have put some flowers in the seed mix, but the flowers are very expensive, and we probably could have collected some flower seeds from the farm prairie, but honestly, it didn't even occur to me to do that. Anyway, we've just turned it into a native grass field, and TWRA donated herbicide and seeds and their seed drill so that we could plant. And the project was used as a match for a North American Wetlands Conservation Act grant. And we were able to purchase that Boiling Spring property that I was telling you about by using this project as a match. So the two fields, the way we manage them, we either burn them in the late fall, or we either bush hog them in the late fall, or we burn them in the late winter. Lately, it's been mostly bush hogging because burns take a lot of energy, and we're already doing a lot of burning. And we're probably going to be doing more burning if we do an expansion on our prairie at the farm. Vernal pool wetlands, I told you a little bit about the green pond. And vernal pools are seasonal wetlands, dry for most of the year, but the reason they're called vernal pools is because they're wet in the spring. When they're dry, you can tell that there's a wetland there because the vegetation is sedges and other wetland indicator plants growing right in that dry pool. And in the spring, over the winter, actually, when we start getting a lot of rain, I think we're going into that part of the year right now, finally the water table comes up and the soil becomes saturated, and then when it rains, the water starts accumulating in the pool. And it's perfect timing for amphibian breeding. And it's just fun to watch that every year. Because the pools are dry for long periods, no fish can live there. And that enables the aquatic larvae of the salamanders, frogs, and toads to mature without predation from fish. Many vernal pools have been lost to development, like so many other types of wetlands have. Many existing vernal pools are hidden in forested areas, so you could look for them and protect them. Green Pond is a vernal pool wetland, and it's on Big Swan Headwaters Preserve. I think I showed you where it is. It's right at the very eastern edge of the preserve, and we just got it because we had to have it. We just had to protect it from idiots. The low-growing vegetation in the pool are there sedges, several different types of sedges. And if you look back in here, you can see that there's some school kids back in there, and they're looking at the sedges. They have seeds on them, and they're looking at them. And they collected acorns and leaves from the pin oaks. That's what these trees are that are growing right. A lot of the trees are growing right in the pond area. The wet pin oaks are a wetland indicator tree that live in Green Pond. The signs, besides looking at the sedges, if you look at the trunks of the pin oak trees, you can see that they have formed these buttress roots, and that helps them to stay put. And you can see this water staining lines where they're partially submerged during the spring. And so Green Pond is a breeding place for two species of mole salamanders. They're in the family Ambystomatidae, and they're very interesting. I became aware of them once we took on this mitigation project for TDOT. I had to study the salamanders there. And so I put out 2x2 pieces of plywood, 1/4 inch plywood, a whole bunch of them, probably 15 of them, and some pieces of tin. And they sort of function as, like rotten logs would, or rocks, or things that salamanders normally go under. They just go under there. And the marbled salamanders come starting in October and November, and they'll go underneath the boards and they excavate a shallow little nest and they lay their eggs. And believe it or not, all those eggs came out of that salamander. I don't know. It's kind of a miracle, but she stays with the eggs and guards them, and it keeps them moist. Her body keeps them moist. It keeps mold from growing on them. She can chase little predators away, and other things get under there like mice and voles. And so she guards the eggs. And then when the pool starts forming and raises and gets deeper, her eggs will eventually get submerged, and then they hatched, and then they're in the pool. And so that happens in about January or something. And around that time is when these spotted salamanders start showing up, and they have a long period. They come in from January, February, and start laying eggs in the pool. And so it's different because this one lays their eggs in the terrestrial, this one lays its eggs in the pool. Here, it's just seen under a board waiting for mating night to happen. And they come back to the pool where they were born, and this is where they have their mating and do their egg laying. And these are some other salamanders that I found under the boards. northern zigzag, northern red, red spotted newt, and slimy salamander. One year the pond totally froze over and it was thick enough that you could walk on it. And I looked down and there was a marbled salamander larva under the ice. So I had to get a picture of that. And then this is what the spotted salamander eggs look like. And they get this green algae associated with them. And I was reading up on it, that it's a mutualistic relationship. The algae gets a benefit from the metabolism of the embryo eggs that are in there. And then they provide a benefit they provide oxygen for the embryos. So it's pretty cool. These are a list of other amphibians that are seen or heard in the Green Pond area. And we find frog eggs and tadpoles, but I have trouble identifying them. And then, of course, I try to bring kids out there. Kids just love it. So to conserve a vernal pool, when you find it, you identify it as a vernal pool, remove non-native plants, shrubs, or trees, protect the hydrology by removing loblolly pines if there are any. That's what we did. They transpire water year-round, and unlike native hardwood trees that go dormant, they are just sucking water all the time. Investigate the amphibians that use a vernal pool by doing like I did, just put out pieces of plywood or old tin, check under them at least monthly, beginning in October through May or June when the pool may dry up. Other times of year, you could find snakes, lizards, skinks under the boards. When the pool forms in winter through spring, look for amphibian egg masses floating, salamander larvae, frog tadpoles. Learn the trees and the vegetation at your vernal pool. Teach others about the cycles of vernal pools and their importance. So the calcareous seeps was another preservation story that had to do with the TDOT mitigation. When we went to visit with the lady at the Army Corps of Engineers, she was the one explaining to us about if we were going to do a TDOT mitigation project, what that would mean, and how it was either restoration, enhancement, or preservation. And she said, we don't really like to give out money for preservation, so you're going to have to really give us a very convincing proposal. So apparently we did. We described what calcareous seeps are and how important they are, and how they provide clean water year round to the streams, and their habitat for rare plants sometimes, and different plant communities. And we said we were going to put a conservation easement on the property. And so this was the calcareous seeps that were on Big Swan Headwater Preserve. And we were able to identify them all and map them. So what are they? They're a threatened wetland type found on the Western Highland Rim, places where groundwater meets bedrock and seeps out of the ground, flowing toward the stream and providing continuous clean water. The mineral soils are thin and gravelly and formed from the weathering of limestone rock, which is why they're calcareous, calcium carbonate. They often have organic muck, and it favors certain plant species. They're located in forest gaps because a lot of them have underlying bedrock. And so only shallow rooted shrubs or small trees can grow around the edges due to the bedrock so close to the surface. So since they're kind of in a gap area that can be sunny, there's many wetland indicator plants there and some rare plants living in these seeps. Seeps have different characteristics. They differ in their physical topography, and we identified over 50 seeps on Big Swan Headwaters Preserve and classified them into 3 types, and I'll show you some pictures: slopes, terraces, and cliffs. The soil depths vary with each one, the amount of sunlight varies, and so they'll have different plant communities in each seep. This one is a slope seep, and you can see the underlying ledge rock under there. And you can see that there really aren't any trees right here. There's maybe some small bushes around the edge. And this one has all Parnassia grandifolia growing in it, and it's a state listed threatened plant. This one is a terrace seep, and it has thicker soils, and the water just sort of, slowly flows down. And this one you can see has maybe a little bit more woody character to it. And then the cliffs are vertical rock ledges, and the water just drips, drips, drips. And we find Parnassia grandifolia in this one and some other plants. This is like what the leaves and the flowers look like in a cluster, and this is one up close. This is the Tennessee yellow-eyed grass, and that's the one I was telling you about that grows at the Langford Branch Natural Area that we own, that we have a working relationship with the Tennessee Natural Areas program. Foam flower, cardinal flower, and large flowered Barbara's buttons is another state listed threatened plant that grows along the Swan in the seeps. And spotted touch-me-not or jewelweed. Some of our seeps are almost all jewelweed. So I'm not sure how it's different than the Parnassia seep, but it seems to be the way it's gone. Different lobelia species, white turtlehead, trout lily, Indian pink. And, some of these plants will also be found in streamside riparian areas. So maybe not quite as wet as the seeps are. If you find seeps on your land, preserve the forest upslope in order to protect the hydrology and keep the seeps flowing into the creeks below. Remove non-native plants, of course, highly invasive microstegium, and we have some in some of our seeps, and we need to always go in there and pull that stuff out. Inventory the plants in search of state or federal listed rare plants, and inform the Natural Areas Program if you find any, and they'll come out and look at your seep and confirm. Protect seeps from foot traffic or ATVs. We found that some of our seeps had trails going right through, and so we're trying to reroute those trails and keep traffic from going through there. And of course, consider a conservation easement. Conservation easements on private lands can protect significant features and habitats in perpetuity. And this will benefit rare and endangered species and streams and riparian areas and wetlands and biodiversity. Certain areas of property can still be developed. You can just set aside a residential area or a rare area where you want activities to be allowed. The conservation easements can provide tax advantages for a private landowner. And if you consult with a conservation attorney, they can help you write it up how you want it. And that's what you do. You write it how you want it. And Swan Trust has put conservation easements on all their lands. 10 Green Land Conservancy holds all of our easements except for the Langford Branch State Natural Area, which is held by the state of Tennessee. So what's next for Swan Trust? We received a NACA grant for a 141-acre addition on the northwest corner of Big Swan Headwaters Preserve. I should have put that map back in here again. It was the one that I showed you early on of Big Swan Headwaters Preserve and all the little parts of it. And the northwest corner, we just bought another 141 acres, which we closed on in April of 2022. And currently we're working with wild ones to eradicate privet species in the seeps and streamside zones on that property and other invasive plants. Richard and a friend of his came down and helped me work on Tree of Heaven, which there's more to do, Richard. I hate to tell you.
Sorry to hear that.
We're going to see in the spring how we did with what we treated, but we got to go back. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll be scheduling more invasive work days, and we hope to have y'all come down and volunteer to help. The ridge tops on this land were planted in loblolly pine before we got it, and while the drainages are hardwood forest, our plan is to work with Southeast Grasslands Institute to take out the pine and restore the ridges to prairie and open woodland. And we know that it'll be possible because all the roadsides of this property, and it has a significant roadside, is just has many examples of prairie grasses and wildflowers. So we know that it's in the seed bank, and that's what happened on the Farms Preserve after we quit farming that area. The seeds were in the seed bank, and that's how Milo explained it to us. He said those seeds just wait for the right conditions, and when you quit farming it, they just came alive. So we know it's possible. And so here's just a few resources, websites that you might find helpful if you're thinking about a conservation easement. These two organizations do in our area hold the most conservation easements. And here's some information for invasive plants, and here's the East Tennessee Nursery if you want to get tree seedlings, Southeast Grasslands, Roundstone, TDEC. I didn't put their website because the tn.gov websites are like off the page. And Natural Resources Conservation Service has great cost share programs for private landowners, and they're into wildlife habitat restoration and grasslands and wetland preservation. So check that out. And then TWRA also has programs. So I probably talked longer than you wanted me to, but I can answer some questions.
It's all good.
All right.
Thank you, Cynthia, for the presentation, and thank you for the incredible work you've done for 20 or more years with the Swan Conservation Trust. It's very, very impressive, and it's wonderful to have groups like that that are preserving the land for us. We do have a few questions. I know it's late, and as people need to go, and some left a thank you and said they had to go, and so we want to make sure I can email you the thank yous after the talk, because I'll get a copy of those in text form. Paul, you had a question. One of the first questions. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask that?
Already have. So 30 years later, what do you see as the biggest challenge that you face in those people like us who want to rewild some areas? What's still the biggest challenge that you guys face and wild ones?
What's the biggest challenge that we would face?
See, this is your 30th anniversary, so you've been doing this for quite a while.
Yeah.
Where are the pushbacks that are really important for you and us?
Well, for us, I think finding some young people to do the work is probably our most difficult challenge. Right now, they're all very busy raising families, and but they come to our events, and so we're hoping to turn over the wheel. Some of it too is just getting them to understand about invasive species. A lot of people, it's such a hard thing to combat that they would rather just ignore it. And it's just, I'm always trying to educate people. It's just one of the big things that we do, that we have to keep doing. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just finished, I'm going to be teaching a class in the fall, in February at Lipscomb in their continuing ed program on native plants. And I just finished the invasive species segment of that class. So I'm trying to help.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
we're all trying to help. It's hard work. So yeah, our chapter needs to have more active younger members. I mean, we have a few and we need more, and we're always trying to get stuff done. But thanks for partnering with us, or letting us partner with you on the invasive plant removal.
Yeah, thanks for what you've done.
Yeah, that was Ashley Cantrell who helped out with the Tree of Heaven. But 2 or 3 previous events, we had as many as 8 or 10 people there working on Chinese privet, and it's just on that new property, and it's just an ongoing battle. But Ashley and I will be meeting Milo Pine over in Canyon County over the Christmas break to check out some big tooth aspens over there that Ashley is interested in introducing to Green Hills Park. So it's like we're all one little community here. There are a lot of comments, which I won't you can read those at your leisure. But I'm looking for other questions.
So I've got a couple
Anybody
here,
else
Richard, that I've identified.
You go ahead.
So Carol Ventura asks, are vernal pools harmed by cedar trees that are green all year? Since the loblolly pines create a problem, do the cedar trees also create a problem? Are there any cedars in the area even?
They're only very small at this time, and I don't think they're very problematic. I'm not sure. I have a real thing about loblolly pines, in case you didn't notice.
Well, the cedar glades occasionally have vernal pools, and they have cedars all around them. So I don't think it's an issue. The pines
Yeah.
really suck up a lot more water.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, Nick Douglas asks which pines are native to the Western Island Rim in either mixed forest or grassy savanna.
Okay. I would call them Virginia pine. They do have short leaves, but they're not what you would call short leaf pine. But I think it's Virginia pine are the ones that are around here. And a lot of times they grow right on the cliffs and on the top of the cliffs. They don't need very much soil. We have some on Big Swan Headwaters Preserve. I think short leaf is more like on the Cumberland Plateau.
Okay. And also you said wouldn't worry too much about a few thickets since they're, they can be interesting in underrepresented habitats as well.
What kind of thickets?
He just said a few thickets. And so he didn't say what kind of thickets. I'm pretty sure it doesn't mean amber honeysuckle thickets or privet thickets or something like that. That would
No.
be invasive.
Right.
Nick, did that get your comment represented? Okay, just unmute yourself if you want to clarify.
There he is, yeah.
I'll mention the Langford branch. Dwayne Estes asked Laura Hunt and me to stop by on one of our trips down to visit you and do some invasive plant removal. And we've been there twice doing a small inventory, and that's an amazing fen. I think of it as being a kind of a bog with a slope.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to the Tennessee yellow-eyed grass, it has an amazing presence of that big leaf grass of Parnassus.
Yeah.
And in September, when it's blooming, it's just spectacular.
Yeah.
And it also has a very rare juncus there, a rush. I forget the name of it.
Juncus brachycephalus.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I remember the cephalus part. Brachycephalus. Yeah, and that's that plant community has a name. I think it's called Parnassia something, but it's globally a rare plant community, and so to have that, so close to you and fairly close to most of the rest of us is pretty amazing. It's a closed state natural area. There are no trails, there are no markers, but if you can look it up on the state Division of Natural Areas site and see where it is, but they want to discourage people from exploring it because it's a bog, and so you can do a lot of damage just walking across it. So.
Right.
Any other? So, what do you use for getting rid of privet? Sharon Bell, she's still with us. You can use the extraction tools up to a certain size, but you do a lot of soil damage when you extract with an extractigator or a weed wrench. My preference personally is to make a cut 3 inches off the ground, horizontal cut, and apply 18% or higher glyphosate perfectly around the edge of the cut. You can get it in the center as well, but that's probably not going to do much good. And so that 18%, some people like to use a higher percentage, is very effective at killing Chinese privet up to 6 inches in diameter. I've never tried one any bigger than that. And we did that, several of us did that a couple of years ago at the Swan Conservation Trust property. And I guess Cynthia, you can tell us how well it works. Last time I was there, I didn't see much coming back, but is that your impression?
Yeah, I think it did really well.
Okay,
Yeah, there's still things coming up from the seed bank because
of
the
course.
area is just, it's inundated with, the neighbor has I think they're probably 50 or 75-year-old privet bushes.
All right,
And they
they're
drop
huge.
seeds and they wash right into our property. So I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to have to talk with him, but he's probably not going to want to cut them down.
Probably not. The cows need their shade.
Yeah, they need their shade. Yeah, he's a cow. He's a cow guy.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks. Thank you, everybody, for coming and hanging around. And thank you, Cynthia. That was so wonderful.
Thanks so much for having me. Hi, Patricia. Hi, Diane.
And next time you need some, want to set up an event, this will help us populate it now that everybody knows who you are and what
Okay.
all the work that you've done. So,
Great. Yeah,
all right.
we should
Yeah.
do it like
BioBlitz.
late winter or something. Yeah, and we'll let you know when the BioBlitz is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And thanks to everybody.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye. Good
you.
night.
Bye.